He's a businessman, entrepreneur, star of the popular reality TV show Dynasty. He joins me to discuss what ails American culture today and how a little bit of everyday evangelization might be the cure. He's CEO of Duck and Buck Commander and the author of the new book, Gospeler, Turning Darkness into Light, One Conversation at a Time. Please welcome to the program, Mr. Willie Robertson. Thank you for being here, Willie. Look, before we get to the book, Gospeler, I want to get your take on what I mentioned in the intro. Our chaotic American culture. Look, this society is noisier and I think more frenetic than ever with cell phones and social media and all the ever-changing and evolving technology. Pew's survey tells us that belief and the attendant church attendance that accompanies it is at an all-time low and getting lower. Willie, how is social media and the noise making it harder to reach people with a message of hope, particularly the gospel?
Yeah, I agree with your statement. I do think it's noisy, and I do think there's a lot of negativity flowing out there. One of the chapters in the book is called Hope Yeller, and it's. I think our calling is more for good news and hope. I think a lot of believers think that their calling is to let everyone else know how bad things are, and I get it. Like we see it, but we don't need everybody just literally spewing all the stuff of what they see. I mean, there's things to debate and fix, and as a country, but I think we need more hope and we need more positive news and something ideas that can work. And that's really the idea of the book. It's not just to spew the negativity, because I think believers get thrown into that. It's like, oh, they're just as bad, and
Right.
the whole world's going to end. That these are the end times. This is so bad. And so sometimes I think we lack the good news, which is the gospel. That's what it means, and we lack where the good news and where that hope is.
Well, faith and family was the bedrock of your iconic series, Duck Dynasty. What, in your estimation, made it so popular and kept it on air for 11 seasons? I mean, it had to be feeding viewers something that they wanted and needed. What was it in your estimation?
I think it was a combination of things, and I think you just had a lot of things come together with that show. Because you got to remember, at the beginning, when we were talking about making the show, we were talking about doing a reality show that had no fighting and no cursing and no nudity, and a family that was going to get along, that was going to end with a prayer, which I never dreamed that would have even went through, and not only did it work, it went all the way to the top, as the most watched unscripted show in history. I think it was, the faith was important, for sure. I also think it was a 3-generational show, so everyone could sit around and watch it together. And that's rare to have a show that, mom, dad,
Right.
and the kids and grandparents can all watch. And I think it was funny, and funny is hard. And you know that too, being in the business, like, it's hard. Most of the stuff we watch is not that funny, or it's only funny to a few people. Or it gets dirty to be funny. And so I think you just had this genuine
Right.
comedy and humor, and people just love that. They love just being able to sit back for 30 minutes. I know this because they've told me that, and they just get a
Right.
chance to laugh and kind of enjoy this, and didn't get hit with everything else. And I think that's harder to do. I mean, think about like late night comedy, which is essentially gone, right? I mean, we just don't have any. It's so hard to find something that you can just laugh at and laugh together.
No, it's filth and politics. That's what late night has become. And it used to be kind of fun, witty, urbane observations, But what you all did, you're right. It was slapstick. It was loving. It was loving. You had a family that was doing this together, and even when there was disagreements or silliness that happened, everybody came together in the end. You not only ate together, you prayed together, something that, by the way, one of the most successful scripted shows at CBS, somebody was watching your show, Willie. At the end of Blue Bloods every week, they do the same shtick. Which is not lost on me. The family comes together and prays and
Right.
again, unifies. Somebody got that memo, and it's a good one. Look, we've been hearing about youth revivals all across the country. Mass baptisms, renewed interest in faith. In the Catholic world, we're a few weeks away from a big Eucharistic revival taking place in Indiana, and there was this incredible procession of tens of thousands of young people in France, pilgrimaging for days to go pray. Willie, there are a lot of young people obviously searching for purpose of meaning in their lives. Will that hunger drive them back to faith, perhaps the faith they left behind, particularly when the culture and the public education system seems to be keeping them away from those traditional values and away from religious practice?
Right. I mean, I think we all hope that's the case. And I did want to step back on what you said about the family prayer at the end of the show. But I'm going to tell you something else that really was lost is just the eating together. Like, that has become so rare. People don't sit together as a family and eat. Everything is takeout and fast, and and so it's just different. So even the time, like, we realize, wow, just that time of we put the cell phones down and we're just having time as a family. I think that's important as well, which can lead to the other as well. I think when the family breaks down, that's when obviously the societies break down. There is this hunger, and there's this. Perhaps it's a, maybe a vision of the bad, and so you're starting to see people move towards the Lord, and generally a lot of times youth have always been the beginning of the start of something, and so and hopefully it doesn't have to get so bad and so painful, because we know that can also pull people to faith as well. I mean, I think about 9/11. You had more people probably in church the next Sunday, and they're starting to gravitate because you're starting to lose some of these ideas that you've built on. And then coming out of COVID, certainly a lot of things were completely lost. People's careers and their identities and everything they thought was up, and now it's down. And so I think we are seeing obviously the residuals of a lot of that pain and damage that had happened. And so we do need answers, which is why I wrote the book. It was like through these conversations, and I just go back to the Bible. I talk about those conversations and what they were like, particularly in the book of Acts, and then the conversations that I've had with people as well. And I start the whole thing starts with the conversation that someone had with my father 50 years ago. And you had a family that was over. We made a movie about last year called The Blind, and so the family split up. It looks like a disaster. And then a man got in his car, drove to a bar, and shared the gospel with my father. And it was really the last hope. It was the only thing that could potentially save his life and this marriage. The marriage stays together. This is a young couple with 3 little boys. They stay together as a family. Then the business comes. Later on, the TV show comes. Now I can look up, and literally hundreds of millions of people have been touched in some way by the gospel. And I can trace that back to that one conversation. I think, what if that wouldn't have happened? I mean, it completely changed the whole trajectory of my life and my whole family's life. So I'm appreciative looking backwards, but I'm thinking, well, who can I talk to that could potentially change their lives, change their marriage, change their children, their grandchildren? You're talking about generational change that can happen, which is why I wrote the book, and that's why I started with that, just because I'm so appreciative, because people have said, like, oh, we're so glad you didn't lose your faith, by doing a TV show, but we feel like everything we have is based on the faith. Like without that, we would have had nothing. We would have been just another statistic, a split up family, and who knows where we'd be.
Yeah, and it really came from Phil Robertson, your father, accepting that message and embracing it and going back to the family. In gospeler, and that term, you describe that term in the book as follows: a gospeler is exactly what I've always aimed to be. The word is defined simply as a person who zealously teaches or professes faith in the gospel. As a follower of Jesus, I believe we are all called to be gospelers. How did you first become a gospeler, and how does one practically do the same?
Well, I'll give you one little funny. That's a real word. I say gospeler. I know you're from South Louisiana, so you can say it.
You see, we got to hit the wrong syllable. You know how that works.
I know how you boys from New Orleans are. So Corey found the word. I was writing this book, and she said, "Willie, I found this word, and it's so cool." And she told it to me, and I was like, "I love that word." And so it used to be known like everyone used this word, and now it has gone in our culture. It's just like a dinosaur word, which is, doesn't. It makes me think it's a little ironic. I think that a lot of people don't
Yeah.
share their faith, and it's not just the idea of a like a pastor. These are like just regular people. They were called known gospelers or known gospelers, and that's what they did. They just went out and shared their faith. So me not being a pastor, and I thought, well, that's the perfect word. And perhaps we can get this back in the culture. For me, I was, and I share that in the book, where I was young. Like I was young and sharing my faith. Even in, I think my first one was in like grade school. I had my Bible and I would share my faith with people. I was modeling after what I saw my mom and dad do, and so I did see them just talk to hundreds and hundreds of people. And once you kind of become known for that, people will bring people to you. They'd be like, they'd send them down to the river. It's like, maybe you can go talk to Phil, and he can talk some sense into you. And so he'd go out there in that old muddy river and baptize people all the time. And so he really became known for that. And so as kids growing up, we did the same thing. And I wanted to capture that and say, what does it work? Because what I find is people they disqualify themselves from sharing their faith. Or they're thinking, well, that's someone else's job, right? That's, or I don't know the Bible well enough, or that's not my gift, or I'm shy. And I try to make the case in the book that when Jesus gave the Great Commission, it was to everyone. And so if you're talking about, making disciples and baptizing people and teaching people, all these things come from conversations that you have. And these are regular, common people. These weren't like in the book of Acts, they're called regular, ordinary, unschooled people, and that's how their peers saw them. And so I think it's on all of us. And I make cases like, I would talk about my wife, right? I mean, I wouldn't be, nervous about mentioning my relationship with my wife and all that. And it would be strange if I told her, I said, well, it's not my gift, so I'm not going to mention you to anyone else because I'm not good at it. And she would probably have a problem with that if I took that approach.
Yeah, I think so. And you may have a dislocated nose from a pan across the face. But look, the subtitle of the book, I think, is important. Turning Darkness into Light, One Conversation at a Time. And I mean, you referenced it there a moment ago. I think a lot of people think evangelization is something done in church. You're talking about something quite different on a smaller, more intimate scale. And, as I read the book, I kept thinking of that line from St. Francis of Assisi, who said, "You are the only sermon most people will ever hear today." Talk about, and you mentioned it about your father becoming kind of an example to you. You kind of answered my question, because I thought the example, the acting on the Word of God is as important as repeating it and conveying it. Because people only come to you if you're immersed in the Word, if you're alive to it, and truly an example of a Christian disciple.
Yeah, I think you can say a lot before you ever open your mouth, just by your kindness. John chapter 4, I write about that, the chapter called Storyteller, where Jesus runs into a woman at the well. It's someone he shouldn't be talking to. They're not from the same region. And incidentally, he starts this, I think we think it can be so complicated. That conversation started with Jesus said, "Can I get a drink of water?" And so if you can ask someone for a drink of water, you can be a gospeler. And that ends with the whole village coming to know Jesus. And it started right there. So she was one of the earliest people that took this encounter with Jesus and then took it back to her village and shared with other people. That's as simple as it can be. And this isn't, I think church, the idea of a meeting place, I don't even call it church. I mean, church, we are the church. So it's like, but when we do get together in bigger settings, it's probably, for me, it's probably one of the least places I even have a conversation with anyone. Generally, we drive there, we walk in, we sit, we listen, and then we leave. And so there's not a lot of conversation. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's usually one person talking. So, like, I'm a business guy, and so I think about things differently. Like if I'm selling a product, and I go to a place, and let's say there's a building with 1,000 people in it, and there's one guy talking to the 1,000 people. If I wanted to get the word out about my product, would I take the one guy on the stage, or would I take the 1,000 people that are going all out into the community, into their workplaces and all that? I'll take the 1,000 every time, to spread the word of Jesus. And I think that's what he was doing when he empowered his people to do that. Then he leaves, and then they go out and spread it. We know it worked because we're still talking about it 2,000 years later. We're still talking about the same story. So this book is for the church. It's for the people. It's for you to get some ideas and say, hey, how could I do this? How could I start this? The Bible says always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. And so part of my preparation is I got to get in the Word. I got to know it. And incidentally, I only have like 7 passages that I generally share with people. Usually because that's about all that somebody can take in at one point anyway. I'm just like the one with the well. I'm going to talk about their story. Where have they been? So many people have been hurt or damaged, and even the idea of church, like that scares people to death. Maybe there's a problem. Maybe there's a problem in the past. So I want to talk to them to get through that and see where that leads. And at the end of the day, I'm just planting seeds anyway. God's doing the work, and Jesus is doing the work. And so I'm just there. If it's just kindness, but if I can answer their questions, I will. I want to show them that I care about them. It starts with caring about people. And I think in our society, that's probably the worst thing we're doing right now is we just literally don't care about each other. And I think the internet and everything else makes it worse because we watch stuff online and we watch people and we go, yeah, now I'm for sure I don't like those people. And so it's just driving people away, and we get real tribal and just in our own camps. And so hopefully we can have some conversations that we can, and it's not shoving it down their throat, and it's not judgmental at all. But it's amazing how we can if we just sit and talk with people and try to point them. I am looking for change if they feel like there needs to be change, like Zacchaeus. Jesus shows up at his house and he says, I'm changing everything. I'm going to start giving people away. And incidentally, Jesus gave us a big clue right there. He said, this is why I came, was to seek and save what was lost. And so Jesus was telling us this is what this is all about, which is sharing it with other people.
Willie, I got a minute left. You're really trying to encourage people to become, in your lingo, hope yellers in this book. As you say late in the book, and you're referring to Ananias going to St. Paul. Don't you love getting dragged into other people's problems? But that's really what you're calling us to do here, to get dragged into other people's problems, because we're all together in this.
It's back to caring about people. So, and I know there's a lot of us, even as believers, we're like, man, I've got my life where I want it. I've done the right things. I've made some good decisions. And then, now I got to, mess with that. But if you think about the idea of Jesus and who you're following, that's exactly what he did. So he didn't come for himself. He came for others. And so that is what we're following. That is who we're following. And to follow him, I think we are going to have to get and try to give them the hope and realize we were all there. We were all away from him, and how he can change our lives.
Well, Willie Robertson, always a joy being with you. And whether you pronounce it the Monroe way or the New Orleans way, Gospeler, Turning Darkness into Light. Willie Robertson's new book, One Conversation at a Time, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. Willie, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
It was a treat. See you, buddy.